And Kristen, Jennifer, did you have any last minute questions or anything? It's pretty straightforward. I'll make sure I introduce you. It'll be very apparent when you should start.
I did want to just make sure it's fine for me to share my screen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, I went ahead and allowed everyone to share their screen, but I think me and you will probably be the only ones that are sharing a screen.
Okay. Okay. And is that 10 minutes like a hard and fast rule?
Hey, Jennifer, don't you be cutting into my time over there.
There will probably be a little wiggle room. I probably won't take quite the 7 minutes that I allotted myself. So okay, I definitely wanted to give you two the most time for sure.
I asked because I have a little snippet from the news, from Action News that had come in during my class, and it's like a minute or two, but it does push me over my time. So I didn't know, I could wait and do that during Q&A.
No, go ahead and do it during your presentation. That'd be fine. Okay. Even if we had to kind of cut down a few of the questions a little bit, and we can always have people ask their question in the chat and get back to them if we need to.
Okay, okay.
All right, well, it is 2 o'clock. I am gonna go ahead and get started. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining the Center for Community-Based Learning for our second webinar in our Spring 2021 series. My name is Dr. Allery Gibbs, and I'm the Curricular Coordinator with the Center for Community-Based Learning, and I'll be your moderator for today's session, Community-Based Transformational Learning for Faculty and Staff. Justin Sipes, our Center's Assistant Director, will be our co-moderator for this session as well. Today, we will provide a general overview of our Center's faculty and staff-centered programs, the Community Scholars Program, also known as CSP, and our Community Engaged Research Fellowship, also known as CUR. And we will hear from two panelists today who have participated in one or both programs and have agreed to share their experiences with us today. After presenting, our panelists will be available for questions from the audience. We kindly ask that our audience members keep their video and audio turned off during the presentations to prevent any unintended distractions. During our Q&A portion, if you have any comments or questions at that time, please feel free to unmute yourself to ask a question, or if you prefer, type it into the chat feature, and Justin will be monitoring that. In the second half of our session, Justin will touch on how faculty can be involved in assessing the impact of community-based learning activities through our center's university-wide assessment. And he will also chat about our community-based learning attitude survey project. Finally, we'll wrap up with any remaining questions or comments from the audience. This session is being recorded so that it can be accessed in the future via the Center for Community-Based Learning events page on our website, where you'll find the link to our YouTube channel. We will put all these resources that you hear about today in our chat as well. I would like to introduce to you our panelists for today. We have Dr. Jennifer Wesley, professor in the Department of Criminology and Criminal Justice. Jennifer was a member of our Community Scholars Program Cohort 10. We're currently in our 12th cohort, and the recipient of the 2018-2019 Outstanding Faculty Community Engagement Award. Also with us today is Dr. Kristen Hicks-Roof, Assistant Professor, Nutrition and Dietetics with the Brooks College of Health. Kristen was also a member of our Community Scholars Program Cohort 10 and is currently a member of our Center's Community Engaged Research Fellowship Program, CUR, which is in its 4th cohort. Before our panelists begin their presentations, I want to give a little background and overview on what the Community Scholars Program and CUR are all about. The Community Scholars Program is a professional community of practice for UNF faculty members and student affairs professionals with a commitment to community-based transformational learning. And you might hear me refer to it as CBTL. Each cohort's experience is designed to enhance the knowledge of and expertise in CBTL, as well as help them develop strategies that support the infusion of CBTL throughout the university. Individuals chosen as community scholars are awarded two $1,500 stipends. So that would be the fall and the spring. Applications for upcoming cohort 13 are open now and available on our website. They are due by 11:59 p.m. Friday, March 19th. So some of the things you'll have to do as a community scholar: attend our Hour Jacks orientation. That's a full day, usually 8 to 4. Participate in 6 3-hour workshops. And those usually occur on Fridays, 9 to noon, and they go throughout the fall and spring semester. Produce a written deliverable, so sort of what you're going to work on and turn in at the end of the program. And that might be something such as a plan to enhance a course, a syllabus, grant proposal, presentations, things of that nature. And then serve as a peer consultant when needed. Participation in CSP, you can expect to increase professional and community-based social networks, identify strengths and weaknesses as a CBTL practitioner, understand your own personal assumptions that shape your practice and the theories behind the best practices of CBTL, gain confidence or proficiency in CBTL pedagogies, and then be able to share your expertise regarding CBTL with other UNF faculty members and student affairs professionals. We also hope that you have a newfound understanding for the role of the community as a co-instructor in the practice of CBTL. As aware of just becoming also aware of all the salient issues that are affecting our local community. And then I do have a note on here that it is possible to work in partners in the community scholarship program. So you can apply with another individual. Just keep in mind that the stipend would be split. So now I'm going to move on to Community Engaged Research Faculty Fellowship, which provides opportunity for faculty members to engage in research that measures the impact of community-based transformational learning and community engagement as well on students, faculty, and the community partner. So who is eligible for CUR? Fellowship recipients are tenured or tenured earning faculty members who demonstrate commitment to community-based transformational learning and community engagement, are willing to commit some of their professional research efforts towards understanding the impacts of CBTL and community engagement on students, faculty, and the community partnerships. Demonstrate an ability to work with the institution on research questions of mutual interest. Make a commitment to communicating with a variety of stakeholders about their findings. And some of the benefits of community engagement research faculty fellowship would be the opportunity to complete research focused on the broad impacts of CBTL and community engagement on students, faculty, and partnerships. Opportunity to present or publish community engagement work at the state, national, and possibly international level. There's a $1,500 stipend each semester, fall, spring, and summer, to support research time and efforts, as well as a community engagement travel award, which would be $1,500 to attend and present at national community engagement conferences in 2022, and that will be based on available funding. UNF CUR Fellowship recipients will attend monthly meetings with the director and CCBL staff, design and implement a CBTL research study, produce a poster or presentation at the annual Community Engaged Scholarship Luncheon, offer one public lecture sharing results, and be available for short presentations to UNF executive leadership if asked. And so how does one become a community engaged research faculty fellowship recipient? Well, you would need to submit a research proposal through the online application form by 5 p.m. Eastern Standard, Friday, March 19th. So both CSP and KER, if you would like to apply, you need to do so by March 19th. And keep in mind that CSP, I believe, is by midnight and KER is by 5 p.m., especially if you are interested in possibly applying for both. Just keep that in mind. And then some of the things that you would have to do, you'd have to submit a proposal. So identify a CBTL and community engagement research topic of interest that focuses on the impact on students, faculty, or the community partnership. Explain the scope of the study and your interest, identify any past experience, explain the relevance of the topic to the broader institution, submit a timeline for your research, and then a copy of current CV and that sort of thing. And all this information will be on our website. And again, we will drop all of that information into the chat as well. We can accept up to 3 projects, and applicants will be notified by May 7th. Again, you can apply as a team, but keep in mind you will be sharing the fall, spring, summer stipends, as well as the travel award if it is made available. Are there any quick questions about either of these 2 programs before we hear from our presenters today? All right. Now that we've learned all about CSP and KER, let's hear from our panelists who have participated in these programs. They're going to talk about either CSP or KER, or in one case, I believe they will speak on both. So let's go ahead and begin with our first panelist. First up, we have Dr. Jennifer Wesley. I want to thank you very much for being here today. And as soon as you are ready, let me stop sharing so that you can share yours.
Okay.
All right, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Thanks. Well, thanks for having me here today. I am a professor in criminology and criminal justice. So I'll begin by saying a lot of my work is already community-based, but what I hadn't done prior to being in the Community Scholars Program is kind of formally designate any of my work as community-based. So what at the time that I applied to the Community Scholars Program, I had been completing some work with a canine inmate rehabilitation program. And just to let you all kind of know what that is when inmates are paired with rescue dogs and they live with those dogs 24/7, and then they engage in an obedience training curriculum and train those dogs to then become more adoptable. So I had actually conducted focus groups with male inmates who were in that program. Now I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. All right. Is it sharing it?
Not yet.
Oh, not yet. Okay. Hold on.
Sometimes there's a little bit of a delay, I've noticed.
How about now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, so this is just a little bit of background about the research itself. These are actually guys that were in the program. Jason and Sugar Mama were actually an inmate and a dog that had been in the program. Sugar Mama graduated from the program about the time that Jason was released from prison. So he was able to adopt her, and he's actually a speaker now who goes out and talks about this, his experience, because he became very attached to the dog. So what I did is I conducted focus groups looking at how the rehabilitation effects of this program could move some of these guys towards away from criminogenic behaviors and towards desistance from crime. The reason I bring that up is because as I was completing that research, I started to think about how could I incorporate students with this, right? How could I make this something that students could learn about? You know, how could students learn about how at-risk populations are helped by these sorts of programs with animals? So at that point, I applied for a Transformational Learning Opportunity Award because I was envisioning a course, and this course was called The Role of Canines in Inmate Rehabilitation. And this was going to have a domestic travel component. So that's what I received the TLO for. And then that was taking place during summer 2019. So around the same time, I applied to the Community Scholars Program because I basically needed help in every aspect of preparing this course. So when I applied to the Community Scholars Program, I was looking at my syllabus development for this course, but also what were the outcomes I wanted? How was I going to get students to reflect on those? And how was I going to assess that reflection, right? So that's led to these two proposed outcomes for the course. How will students question their assumptions about incarcerated offenders and the role of rehabilitation? And then how will students appreciate the needs of at-risk and incarcerated individuals and how they can benefit from innovative rehabilitation programming with canines? So I went into my CSP application with that sort of question, and how was I going to develop this basically in all ways? I had two community partners with whom I had already established relationships. So TAILS, known as Teaching Animals and Inmates Life Skills, is, or at the time was, the rescue that pulled the dogs to go and be placed in the correctional facilities in the larger Jacksonville area. And then there was a program called Canines with Careers, which is at Best Friends Animal Sanctuary in Kanab, Utah, which happens to be the largest no-kill animal sanctuary in the US. Both of these community partners I had established relationships with through sort of a history that we had. So with TAILS, I had been working with the rescue. I had conducted research with them. I was fostering dogs for them. And then Canines with Careers at Best Friends, I had volunteered at Best Friends for 2 summers prior and met with the director of Canines with Careers. So I had talked to both of these groups about potentially participating in a course, and they had agreed to do that. How that was going to emerge, we weren't totally sure. The class itself was going to be broken up into 3 parts. This is something I worked on also during my year in the Community Scholars Program. These are some photos of my spouse and I when we were at Best Friends in Utah previous summers volunteering. So we were going to have the first third of the course, and again, this is only a 6-week summer course. The first third of the course, classroom time, then travel with students to Best Friends, then for the final third, be back in Jacksonville working at the correctional facilities that had TAILS. And again, this was going to be a course with students. It happened to be capped at 10 students, and these were selected through an application and interview process. So just to give you a sense of the sorts of tasks that I wanted the students to engage in this course, and again, this is something that emerged through the Community Scholars Program. When we went to Best Friends, the students were going to work with Canines for Careers, and basically that entails working with the director who would go out and assess rescue dogs for how appropriate they were working with at-risk populations of humans. So it could be prison programs, but it could also be search and rescue dogs, therapy and crisis response dogs. Students would also shadow personnel at that site, go to some off-site visits to assess animals. And they also had several volunteer shifts that they engaged in at Best Friends, because Best Friends has a range of animals: horses, dogs, pigs, rabbits, cats, dogs. So students selected the areas that they wanted to volunteer, and they did several shifts with that. Back here in Jacksonville with TAILS, the students were going to observe male inmates with the dogs that they were paired with and how they implemented the training curriculum, and then also speak informally with inmates about their experiences in the program and kind of get a sense of what it was doing for the guys that were participating. And they also were going to volunteer for the rescue that was running the TAILS program. So through CSP, I kind of broke down my course structure and my grading system into this, but part of my issue was I had never done reflective journals before with a class. So how do I create those and how do I assess them was one of my biggest hangups. I really needed help with that. And that's where CSP really helped me, especially my colleagues in the program and their suggestions at the various workshops that we had. So I decided that the reflective journals for students, they did 5 of these throughout the 6-week course. The reflective journals had to do one of the following. So each reflective journal, the student had to select one of these. Could be either that they recognize a type of self-knowledge and explore how whatever event they were engaged in shifted that. They could identify and explore questions that they had related to the topic and how those came up due to the event or experience and show how their understanding was advanced. Or, and this one seemed to come up the most in the students' reflective journals, coming about a disorienting event, which made them feel uncomfortable or challenged or affected emotionally when their expectations were brought into question. So that helped me understand how I was going to orient these reflective journals. But where I still needed help was how I was going to assess those. And I had several grading rubrics that I drafted, and my colleagues in the CSB program kind of were like, no, that's not going to work. And so through their help and through participating in the Community Scholars Program, we had learned about the reflective cycle or the reflection cycle. That's how I decided that I was going to assess the students. So the reflection cycle has 5 parts. Well, it has 6, but I consolidated 2 of them into 1. So the first is description. I just wanted the students to describe the event that occurred. Then I wanted them to consider and think about this. What were their reactions? How did these originate? Then they had to analyze this a little more deeply. What sense can they make of the situation? How do they integrate class material into their understanding? Conclusions, what's their takeaway? How do we answer the so what question? And then action, what are they going to do differently in the future based on what they learned? So they could have chosen any of those 3 general areas I mentioned in the previous slide, but then they had to apply all 5 of these elements of the reflection cycle to that particular choice. And then the way that I assessed it, and this is what I ended up going with, is I was assessing them based on how effectively they addressed each of those reflection cycles. So you can see my point breakdown here. If they addressed all 5 of the reflective cycles, then they would get full credit. If they addressed 4, they would get less credit, and so on. And that served me very well in terms of assessing them and giving them good feedback as far as how to work on their next reflective journal that they were completing. I had asked the students for permission to use their reflective journals in research, and they agreed. And I ended up publishing an article called Skimming the Surface or Digging Deeper, the Role of Emotion in Students' Reflective Journals During an Experiential Criminal Justice Course. I'm not going to read the abstract to you, but I do want to touch on the purpose and the conclusions. So the purpose was to look at how students' emotional reactions, and believe me, they had quite a few, how these emotional reactions shaped their reflection in their journal entries, and then key points where their reactions were routed into more developed phases of reflection. So this was a qualitative content analysis of their reflective journals, and it resulted in these several themes. Unpacking emotions, which examines emotions that emerge from their journal. So that was kind of like the first point. And then pivot points. So were there critical shifts in their thinking? Failure to launch. Some students got stuck in these reflective phases and couldn't really develop beyond those. And then potential for action, which addressed how successful reflection leads to future action, including their community involvement and their community investment. Now, this was published in the Journal of Experiential Education, came out somewhat recently. These are some photos of the students, both at Best Friends and then at one of the prisons. And we also made it into some print and TV media about the course. And I was going to just show you a brief snippet of that news article, if I can get out of this real quick. So this, one of the news stations actually came to one of our events, and I'm going to play that for you right now.
Program. Since then, Action News Jack's Elizabeth Pace found out it's now part of a new course at UNF.
It's not showing on the screen.
Oh, it's not?
It's a unique bond between an inmate and an abandoned or...
You guys can't see that?
We can hear it, but we don't see the actual video.
Oh, that's a shame. I don't know. It says that I'm screen sharing. Well, I can just stop there then if you guys can't see that, and maybe I can mess with it and see if I can show it later. So I will, what's that?
If you you're going to have to stop what you're currently sharing and then reshare the new element, and then it'll come up.
Oh, okay. Let me try that. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
Yes.
Perfect.
Abused dog.
Miss Bell? Miss Bell?
For LeVar Franklin, he learns how to train and care for Miss LaBelle 24/7 while she's trying to become more obedient to get adopted.
People abandoned her, you know what I'm saying? They gave up on her. Like some people give up on us. And you know what I'm saying? You always got to have hope in somebody.
Tales is a canine inmate program completely sponsored by Pitt Sisters. The Montgomery Correctional Facility has used this program for the past 5 years.
These men are in this program are going to get out. They're going to be released. Why not give them the skills that they need while they're here to be more successful when they get out?
Tales is now part of a new class at UNF, where selected students study the role of dogs with inmate rehabilitation. Thursday, students questioned inmates about how it's changed their time in jail.
While the dogs are coming from situations where most people would have thought that they shouldn't be given a second chance, it's the same with the inmates.
They're seeing that these guys really need to be humanized. They need tools to help them get back out into society. And so this has really been an eye-opener for students in a lot of ways to really see rehabilitation is important, and we can do that through these programs with the dogs.
Each inmate will walk away with a dog training certificate. In the past 5 years, officers say every dog here has been adopted. Reporting at the Montgomery Correctional Facility, Elizabeth Pace, CBS 47, Action News Jack.
All right, so I'll go ahead and stop it there.
Wow, thank you. What a cool project. I love all the layers to the partnerships too. You know, you have the organizations, but you also have the inmates, you have the animals. So that, you know, it complicates things, but it also adds a lot of value and just ripe with reflection opportunities. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, it was super complicated, but we made it work.
Okay. All right. So for our next panelist, we have Dr. Kristen Hicks-Roof. Hello, Kristen. Thank you for sharing your experience with us today. Kristen will bring a very unique perspective, having been part of both programs, the Community Scholars Program and CUR. So like Jennifer, Kristen was part of the CSB Cohort 10. She is also currently in our Community Engaged Research Fellowship Cohort 4, and that's been particularly challenging with the pandemic and all of that. So Kristen, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Ellery, for inviting me to present. I really have enjoyed all of my time with both the programs, so I'm excited to talk about my involvements and what I learned and kind of what I was able to do based on these involvements in both programs. So I'll spend a couple of minutes on the community scholars, and then I will spend the last couple of minutes on the community engaged research. I don't have any PowerPoints. I'm just going to kind of talk it through my experiences. So I had developed a mentorship program between dietitians and dietetic students when I was back at Texas A&M. And it was really a small community-based project that when I had moved to UNF, I was thinking, okay, how can maybe we have this program expand into the Jacksonville area. And so my first year, I had applied for the Community Scholars Program because I thought that it would be a good connection point to how can I expand this sort of feature in the community. So the Community Scholars Program, the things that I really want to touch on is it just really helped to open up my perspective of community-based learning and all the components of it. There were a series of workshops, which Allery had mentioned at the beginning, and those workshops were really pivotal to developing the structure and the framework of how my community-based mentorship program could expand not only in the Jacksonville area, but you'll see as I move to the community engaged research, I've now grown that to be nationwide, all based on really what I learned in the Community Scholars Program. Because it allowed you to increase your knowledge and understanding of working with different community partners. So that was one of the things that I really loved about the program. Another thing that I enjoyed about the community-based learning, and I was with Jennifer and her cohort, so I remember everything that she was just presenting on, and it was cool to see that she published a paper on it, is you really get to bounce a lot of ideas off each other in the cohort, even though all of you have different initiatives and you have different evaluation measures, you all can springboard different ideas. And so that was really helpful for me because I was able to get different perspectives of things that I hadn't thought about when I was doing my community-based work. And I thought that was really useful of being in the Community Scholars Program because you could refine and enhance your programming to ultimately be successful. So what were some of my outcomes based on that? I really learned a lot more of a personalized approach when it comes to my mentorship program. So I have refined a lot of how I run my mentorship program, how I market my program, how we partner the nutrition students with the dietitians, and that's all related to the Community Scholars Program. I learned a lot and reflected on the reciprocity piece, and that actually changed one of the foundations to my mentorship program is we transitioned to a project-based mentoring program. So it had that reciprocity piece, which prior to Community Scholars, I had never even really thought of that. I was just like, yeah, these people want to be part of my program. So they're just part of my program. And, you know, after Community Scholars, it was really eye-opening of how having that reciprocity piece actually improved my numbers and lowered my attrition rate in my program. So that was key for my program. And ultimately, I produced one of my outcome measures as well was to produce a paper and a grant from the Community Scholars. So after I finished Community Scholars, I said, man, I'm continuing to grow my program. I need more. And I was very research focused with my Community Scholars project. So it just seemed like the next best step to apply for the Community Engaged Research Fellowship. This was really more dedicated and focused on the research initiatives, kind of strategies for how to collect data, how to disseminate your programming. And so I wouldn't say I learned as much in this program, but it's hard too because COVID, did that have an impact? I don't know. But there weren't as many workshops and trainings on community engaged programming, but I have learned a lot from my cohort who's, again, been pivotal to the growth and expansion of my program. So it's helped as far as research. So lots of ideas, really collaborative. And it's not just collaborative, like you benefit from your program, but you also help a lot of your other cohort members improve in their program strategies. So it's really, it's very satisfying. So what are some of my outcomes for my community engaged research? Due to COVID, my mentorship program went from face-to-face, which was very connecting with the local community here in Jacksonville. And we also had a community in College Station where Texas A&M is. So between COVID, some of the feedback I learned from my cohort, we actually transitioned to a virtual mentoring, project-based mentoring program, and we launched nationwide. So we went from, man, I started this program in 2016. I think we had like maybe 30 people. In this year's cohort, we have almost 650 people in our program. And it really could not have been done without what I took away from community scholars and community engaged research to refine the program and really have a more focused approach. It's helped as well in my data collection measures. So I now have changed some of what data I'm collecting and how I'm collecting it, like a mentoring log and reflections, kind of what Jennifer was saying. I've added that to my programming. And so this year it's exciting. I'm presenting at 5 national conferences on this program. It's really gained national attention. We have a website. I've applied for grant funding to support it. So I'm just thankful for these programs because it's allowed me to really grow my research agenda and be more comfortable and confident in community engaged research. And the students, I mean, I have students from all over the country now, so it's not just UNF students, but the feedback that I receive from UNF students and all over the country is just the impact of them having this opportunity to work directly with a healthcare professional and gain that experience in this project-based mentoring program. So that's really what I wanted to talk about.
Thank you very much. I love to hear how it seems like it expanded and expanded really quickly. So it's really cool. I like hearing about all the national community engagement as well. It's really interesting. Well, thank you very much for that. So let me share my screen. All right. So at this time, I would like to move into the Q&A portion of this webinar and invite participants to ask our panelists any questions that they may have. Feel free to unmute and ask your question, or you can drop it in the chat feature at the bottom. So actually, let me start us off with a few questions. Hold on 1 second so I can get a little bit better visual here. All right. So for our first question, what prompted your interest in community-based learning and applying for either CSP or CUR? And that can be either for Kristen or Jennifer, and whoever wants to go first.
Kristen, you go ahead.
So I think Jennifer and I had both kind of mentioned it at the beginning of our presentations. We were actually already doing this work. And that was, maybe it's something that I'm just passionate about, is just working with the community, but it was already a program that I had running. And so what made me interested in community scholars, I actually heard about it from a colleague, and she was saying, since you already do this community-based work, maybe this would help you expand your research agenda. And then kind of everything just fell in line from then. But ultimately, I'm just really passionate about community-based work and getting the students out and involved and having that experiential learning opportunity.
Yeah, I would kind of second that. You know, that's the kind of work I've always been doing. That's the kind of teaching that I do. And I thought, you know, there's university resources to help me develop this, to help understand it better, how to formalize it, how to maybe take it to another level. And that's what led me to apply to the Community Scholars Program. And then it kind of snowballed from there. And, you know, again, same as what Kristen is saying, you know, I applied for the Transformational Learning Opportunity, got that. And I was like, oh, I can, you know, apply to the Community Scholars Program. If that works out, then I can actually develop this course that I'm conceptualizing. And it just brought it all together. So it was really a great opportunity to do that, because there are these university resources to do this. And I hadn't capitalized on them ever in the past.
What I think as well, it makes you, it almost forces you to have deadlines and responsibilities to move your projects forward. And that was really helpful for me, because each of those check-in points for both programs, let me say, okay, I need to do this before our next meeting so I can update everyone in my cohort. And you didn't want to go to your cohort meeting and not have any updates. So that was also really helpful in moving my progress along.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And Kristen and I being in the same cohort, I mean, meeting every month for a different workshop, sometimes, I'd come to the table feeling pretty confident about what I was bringing. Other times I was quickly humbled by my colleagues telling me, no, I don't think you should do it that way. But ultimately it led to a great product. So that's what was really, really awesome about it.
Yeah, I like that accountability. I hadn't really thought about it before, but the timelines, the check-ins, and each other are really going to kind of keep you on that path.
Mm-hmm.
So moving gears a little bit, let's talk about something that might have derailed your path. So what did you find the most challenging pre-pandemic versus now with any of your community engaged work?
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm just glad I did this class in summer 2019, because if I had been wanting to do it summer 2020, it would have been impossible. So I'm just lucky that I made it in under the wire with that. But interestingly, with the pandemic right now, I'm doing a project with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, and I'm conducting all of my research interviews on Zoom. And so that's the first time I've ever done that. But what's really cool is that there's obviously a record, and there's also a transcription feature on Zoom that is somewhat raw, but then if you listen to the audio, you can adjust the transcript. So that's been an interesting development that I think has actually saved me some time in terms of the collection of data and in the community and working with community partners. And Zoom is sometimes more convenient for people. So that has definitely changed the way that I do my research, and maybe a little more challenging to establish rapport with some of those partners, but it's a skill set that I'm working on. So that's been the biggest change for me.
I think for my programming, we had the in-person mentoring, but we knew really that as we were going to expand our program, because we wanted to keep growing it across state lines and then, ultimately nationwide. And so it really just kind of pushed the agenda of moving nationwide a lot faster than we had projected. So it was a lot of work in the beginning of the pandemic. And I think the pandemic influenced our numbers because a lot of people had a lot of personal issues to take care of. And so that has contributed to a higher attrition rate, I think, this past year. But I still think it's really important, and I'm actually writing a paper on this right now with one of my students, is how can we still provide these experiential learning opportunities, and how can we still connect with students in the virtual environment, because who knows what the future has to tell. And so I think that community and experiential learning is critical, for student success, because they want those opportunities to be engaged. And so you have to navigate the waters of how to produce that.
Absolutely. I want to open it up. Are there any questions, comments from the audience before I kind of go on with my questions?
Well, I'm kind of just curious to hear from Jennifer and Kristen about that transition from community-based learning project to research project. Like what shifted in your thinking? What sorts of different kinds of decisions did you have to make that you felt was different? And was there something that kind of helped in that transition? And I don't know if that even makes sense, if that question even makes sense, but.
Could you differentiate kind of those two things that you're saying, moving from one to the other?
Yeah, in other words, each of you have discussed the project as an opportunity to support students in their learning, and then also understanding the research connection to the work that you're doing. And so I'm kind of looking for that connection, what was that connection like for you? Were there some thoughts and decisions you had to make as you made that connection, as you make a transition and say, okay, this is what I'm doing for students, but here's what I'm doing for scholarship?
My doctoral advisor had always said, never lose the opportunity to publish. I mean, he really enforced that into me. And so I think I already had the like research aspect in mind. So maybe that's different than people who haven't thought of that. But I think it's just important to, and the Community Scholars Program can help to kind of push the research side too, if you want to. You don't have to, but I think there's always opportunity to publish, because why do your programming and no one knows about it? I think we should all, as faculty, have that in mind, but I'm just personally biased on that part.
Yeah, so same with me. I feel like there's always been a fluid movement between my research and my teaching. So even when I was conducting the research with the guys in the prison who were in the Canine Inmate Program, I had at least 3 students who would accompany me and take notes, later on help me with some of the analysis. And it's very different for students to be in that environment. And then when I started thinking about this class, as Kristen said, I thought, okay, but there might be also a way to get research out of this. So I thought ahead of the game, before even having the class put together, I put something in the syllabus and I talked to the IRB about getting students permission for their reflective journals, because I thought that could be a great source of data that could contribute to thinking about students' reflection. I wasn't sure how that was going to fall out exactly, but I got their permission and I planned for it ahead of time. So it's sort of thinking about those things in tandem and how they're fluid rather than as 2 separate silos or entities. And that's sort of how I've always operated, because again, I mean, I teach classes like family violence or women in crime. All of those things have community-based components that students are involved in, but they also are related to my research. So it's always been a fluid movement in between that I just go back and forth. Not one doesn't precede the other. They just advance in the way that they advance.
Yeah, thank you for those thoughts.
Any other audience questions? Well, my next question, and I believe both of you sort of touched on this a little bit, how has either CSP or CUR informed or affected the way you teach or engage with your students?
Well, I will say that I had never done any travel with students before. And even domestic travel with students was very unique in terms of spending all of this concentrated time with them in this course that I put together. Now, I know that's a little bit afield from your question, but how the Community-Based Scholars Program has sort of affected our, how we address our students. Is that what your question was?
Yeah. Does it affect the way you interact with them now, as opposed to maybe not having gone through one of the programs or done a lot of community engaged work?
I think for me, it really helped me formalize in my mind how to assess students and also the types of outcomes that I want them to have coming away from a course. It allowed me to organize things in my own mind for this particular course, but then that was able to kind of have a widespread dissemination, where now I think about that in terms of all of my courses, where there's a community-based component and I want to think about how the students are reflecting, and I want to think about how to assess that in a more formalized way than perhaps I used to. It forced me to think that way, and now I think it benefits me in understanding the students and also the students in their reflection.
Thank you. Kristen?
Yeah, I think the same for me. You know, my community scholars and community engaged research was not affiliated with the class. So I think that's a little bit different than Jennifer's. I've actually never embedded it into my curriculum until this semester. I got to develop a new course and I was like, wow, everything I learned from community scholars and community engaged research, can I make this a CBTL course, which I am, and it's an online graduate course. So it's even a different audience too, because it's not just the Jacksonville area. But I actually took the workshops from my community scholars and almost have like mini assignments on finding a partner, conducting a needs assessment, and then my students are going to write a mini grant to help support an organization. So that was something that I have added into a class this semester, because I think Jennifer is right. I think just participating in these programs help. I don't know if they necessarily help you, but it just brings the idea of how can you involve the community maybe in some of your courses. And that's not a research thing. That's just, well, I mean, it is going to be research because my students are going to write a mini grant on behalf of their community partners, but I'm not collecting any data on that, unfortunately, yet.
Thank you. See, another question. What did you learn about your community partnerships, and it can be any of the ones that you've had, that surprised you the most?
Okay, so it was very complicated in terms of my community partners, in part because one of them wasn't local. Things changed last minute. So even the schedule that I had for the TAILS program, one of the prisons, we were going to go to 4 or 5 different prisons. One of them went into lockdown. Okay, that's out the window. So now we got to go to a different prison. The prisons were very different. Some of the students were freaked out because of the security measures at one. The other one seemed really open. So they were like, what's going on with this one prison versus another? I had to change the syllabus multiple times, and I did warn them that I would probably have to do that because the community partners' schedules were out of my control, but they still sometimes had trouble adjusting to that. With Best Friends and the Canines with Careers program, you know, that was a lot of work for them. They put together a whole 2-week schedule, including, you know, where we fit in leisure time, where do we fit in when students are going to do their reflective journals, where do we fit in travel? We went to 3 off-site animal shelters. I had to take a van training to drive a 15-person van, which was probably the biggest stressor of all for me in this whole thing. So there was a lot. There were they had to have legal contracts signed, a lot of moving parts that did all work out. And, but it was an immersive experience for me trying to get that all going and make sure that the community partners know how appreciative I am and that they feel like they're getting something back, which is part of the reason why students volunteered, so that it wouldn't feel like we were just taking from the community partners, but that this was something that, you know, we had in the media. You know, there was opportunities for these programs to get more attention. So they were both nonprofits, so get them attention in that way. So there was definitely a lot going on with the whole community partner side, but again, it's just sort of, you got to take each step and deal with it and do it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think for me, you know, my community partner is a lot of separate entities. I don't just have one organization I work with. You know, right now I have really 320 community partners because I have 320 dietitians that are out in the community that are like working as part of my program. So it goes back to really what I learned in Community Scholars, which I think was a perfect transition, that doing the Community Scholars and then moving to the Community Engaged Research. Because that Community Scholars, I learned a lot about the reciprocity and how to make sure that they felt valued. And so I take a lot of feedback. Like this year, we implemented that we're offering free 2 professional development sessions as part of our program, which are continuing education for our healthcare providers. And so that was like a free incentive for them to be participating, because you know, as I've learned and refined the program based on the content I remember from Community Scholars, is just making sure that you're really keeping track, like getting that feedback from them and refining moving forward, not just going based on my own agenda and how I feel the program's going, but really getting their feedback and how can it improve moving forward. And I think we're going to have a lot of mentors continue with our program even after this cohort, because they see that we are invested in them just as much as they're invested in us.
Can I add one thing too that I just thought of? After the course was over, I created a Qualtrics survey that was very detailed for students. and asked them about every single piece of what they did with the community partners and asked them to give their feedback on that. And then I shared that with the community partners because we had a very collaborative relationship. So that helped the community partners know what was most beneficial for the students, and what they got out of it. And it was much more telling than the ISQs. I used it, I did include it in my annual evaluation because I was asking them about every aspect of the experience, the students, but it also was something that I could collaboratively share with the partners.
Thank you very much for that. A lot of good stuff. We could probably go on, but I'm going to kind of move on from here. So I believe that concludes the Q&A portion for our panelists. Now I'd like to hand it over to Justin to talk a little bit about our university-wide assessment and our community-based learning attitude survey. And then we'll have just a couple minutes at the end for any remaining questions or comments from the audience. So let me share my screen. All right, can everyone see the slide? Justin, can you see the slide?
Yep, it's up there.
All right, so whenever you are ready, go.
Yeah, so the last two pieces are additional ways that as faculty members you can interact with the center. So the first one is the university or community-based learning university-wide assessment. And so this is a way as a faculty member that you can measure the effectiveness of CBL course assignments within your courses. So faculties are eligible to participate every semester. We do the rating process once a year. And what happens is we have two independent raters who are faculty members at the institution. Will evaluate artifacts based on the AAC&U value rubrics, which we have adopted at the university for our 4 CBTL learning outcomes. So the faculty member who's participating will provide a copy of the syllabus. They'll provide information about the assignment that's being evaluated. They'll provide the intended learning outcomes to be evaluated, and then the expected level of learning outcome achievement based on the AAC&U value rubric. From there, the two independent raters go through the artifacts that are provided. And so these are student assignments that were completed for the course. The ratings are compiled, and then the center produces a report that we then issue to the faculty member based on the ratings. And then we also provide one-on-one consultations to help review the reports and provide feedback as to ways that you might be able to better align assignments within the course to help achieve the learning outcomes that the faculty member is intending on doing it. We have been collecting data on this since 2012. And so we're actually in the process right now of pulling all that information into the university's data warehouse. So that'll provide us some opportunities to create some really robust reporting methods, which will help enhance what we are providing as a CBL opportunities for students, especially in the course arena. So, and you can see at the bottom there, and we'll post it in the chat, more information about university-wide assessment. We typically solicit for this at the very beginning of each semester starting. So that way the faculty member has time to put information in their syllabus about this particular process. And the other thing to know is the rating happens at the end of each semester after grades have been submitted. So if students are concerned that if they're participating in this, it might impact their grade, grades have already been submitted, so this has no effect on that whatsoever, because we all know that's one of their biggest concerns. And then the other opportunity, real quick, is the Community-Based Learning Attitudes Project. So this is a pre-post-test survey to assess changes in student community service attitudes, academic motivation, identity and empathy through participation in community-based learning experiences. Again, faculty members can participate in this every semester. We have a group of graduate research assistants that work within the center that they implement the survey, they collect, clean, and analyze the data. They provide semester reports, and then they help maintain the larger data set for us to have the capacity to answer other research questions. And one of the things that we're working on as well is through the larger data set that we've been collecting is developing semester reports. That way faculty members can compare either to other similar courses, either based on level or subject, or if they have previous course data that they've submitted as part of this project, being able to look at comparisons through that. Again, we solicit for participation happens prior to the start of the semester. So that way, if faculty members want to participate, they have time to build it into their course and have it added to their syllabus. It is recommended that it's built into the course as an assignment. However, as according to IRB, we still have to make sure you provide students can opt out of it since it is considered research. So an alternate assignment would need to be provided if a student wishes not to participate. And then ultimately it doesn't have an impact on their overall grade, whether they choose to participate or not. And then we're also exploring now our ways to adapt this beyond just single courses, because as we know, sometimes as a student might have an experience, the learning from that experience might not happen within the course of the semester. And so we're trying to work with some departments that might have community-based learning experiences as a foundational element of the program of study, and looking at ways that we can evaluate students using this particular instrument at a certain entry point, and then either at a midpoint or an end point of the program to see change over time. So those, again, are just a couple ways, additional ways that you can interact with summer that are not as time intensive as CSP and CUR. There aren't the monthly meetings and workshops that go along with these. And these are good ways too, if you are still new and exploring community-based learning, that can help provide some feedback as to ways to potentially strengthen what it is you're doing, and are good stepping stones to just sort of be introduced to the center before you might feel ready to apply for a CSP or CUR program.
Hi, thank you, Justin. So at this point, I'd like to wrap things up with any remaining questions the audience might have for Justin or myself, or even our panelists for today. So feel free to unmute and ask your question, or you can drop it in the chat. All right. So just a few closing remarks. I'd like to thank all of you for attending our webinar today, Community-Based Transformational Learning for Faculty and Staff, as part of our Spring 2021 series. I would like to especially thank Dr. Jennifer Wesley and Dr. Kristen Hicks-Roof for your work as panelists today and sharing your experiences with our faculty-centered programs. It is most appreciated. Also, thank you to Justin Sipes, our center's assistant director, for your help today as well. Please remember that if you're interested in applying to our next Community Scholars Program and/or Community Engaged Research cohorts, the applications are available on our website and open until Friday, March 19th. Stay tuned for upcoming webinars and virtual events hosted by the Center for Community-Based Learning this spring and summer. Our next webinar explores the question, I did community-based work, now what? It will be held April 14th, noon to 1, moderated by our center's director, Dr. Dan Richard, and Assistant Director Justin Sipes. If you'd like to share or revisit any of this information in the future, this session, along with other previously recorded CCBL webinars, can be found on our YouTube channel, which can be accessed via the CCBL events page on our website. Again, thank you for participating today. We look forward to seeing you at future sessions, and please share these opportunities with your colleagues. Take care, everyone, and have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. All right. Okay, I need to stop recording.